February 1959. 9 experienced hikers entered one of the most unforgiving mountain ranges on Earth. None of them would ever return.
Imagine hiking into one of the coldest and most isolated places on Earth with 8 experienced friends. Only for rescuers to discover your abandoned tent weeks later, sliced open from the inside. Your boots, coats, food, and supplies are still there. But you are gone. A trail of footprints leads away into the darkness, left by people wearing socks, a single shoe, or nothing on their feet at all. Some bodies are later found near the remains of a small fire. Others appear to have died while desperately trying to return to the tent. The last 4 are buried beneath several feet of snow, and when investigators examine them, they discover injuries so severe that one doctor compares the force to a high-speed car crash. No enemy is found, no clear weapon is discovered, and the official investigation ends with a phrase so vague that it only deepens the mystery. The hikers were killed by a compelling natural force. This is the true story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. In January of 1959, 10 young Soviet adventurers set out on a difficult winter expedition through the northern Ural Mountains. Most of them were students or recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, and nearly all were experienced hikers and cross-country skiers. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a calm, disciplined engineering student known for planning his expeditions carefully. The goal was to travel hundreds of miles through frozen wilderness and reach Mount Atordan, a remote peak surrounded by forests, deep snow, and brutal winter winds. Completing the route would qualify the members for one of the Soviet Union's highest hiking certifications. They understood the danger, but they were not reckless beginners. They carried maps, skis, axes, cameras, warm clothing, food, a stove, and a large tent designed to hold the entire group. Before heading deeper into the wilderness, they took cheerful photographs, wrote diary entries, joked with one another, and documented ordinary moments from the trip. Nothing in those final images suggested that they were afraid or being followed. One member, Yuri Yudin, became ill early in the journey and was forced to turn back. At the time, he was devastated. Years later, he would realize that his illness had saved his life. The remaining 9 continued north. They were Igor Dyatlov, Zaneta Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubanina, Rustam Slobodin, Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonishenko, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brinol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. On February 1st, worsening weather pushed them off course. Instead of descending into the shelter of a nearby forest, the group found themselves on the exposed slope of a mountain called Kholat Syakhl. In the language of the local Mansi people, the name is often translated as Dead Mountain. With darkness approaching and visibility deteriorating, Dyatlov decided not to lose altitude by returning to the forest. The group cut into the snow and pitched their tent directly on the slope. It was a difficult location, exposed to wind and extreme cold, but photographs recovered later showed that the hikers appeared organized and calm as they prepared the campsite. They ate dinner, changed clothes, wrote in their journals, and settled inside the tent. At some point during the night, something happened. Whatever it was, it caused 9 experienced hikers to abandon nearly everything that could keep them alive. They left behind heavy coats, boots, blankets, food, knives, axes, and other essential equipment. The tent's normal entrance was not used. Instead, the fabric was cut open from the inside, suggesting that the group believed they needed to escape immediately. Outside, temperatures were far below freezing. Strong winds swept across the mountain, and visibility would have been extremely poor. Yet the hikers moved downhill toward the forest, some wearing only socks, light clothing, or a single shoe. Strangely, the footprints did not clearly show a wild stampede. Searchers later described the trail suggesting that the group moved away together, walking or moving in an organized line. This raised a disturbing question. What could force them out of the tent so urgently, yet still allow them to descend the slope in relative order? The group was expected to send a telegram after completing the route. When no message arrived, there was little immediate concern because delays were common on difficult expeditions. But as the days passed, their families became worried. On February 20th, a search operation began. Volunteer students, experienced hikers, aircraft, and eventually military personnel entered the mountains. 6 days later, searchers found the tent. It was partially covered by snow and badly damaged, but most of the group's equipment remained inside. Their boots were lined up. Clothing and food were still there. Cameras and personal belongings had not been stolen. Investigators found cuts in the tent fabric that appeared to have been made from within. Outside, searchers discovered footprints descending toward the tree line approximately 1 mile away. Following them through the snow, they reached a large Siberian pine. Beneath it were the remains of a small fire. Nearby lay the bodies of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. Both were poorly dressed, and neither was wearing proper footwear. Branches on the pine had been broken several yards above the ground, suggesting that someone may have climbed the tree, perhaps to search for the tent, watch for danger, or collect wood for the fire. Between the pine and the abandoned campsite, searchers found 3 more bodies. Igor Dyatlov was discovered facing in the direction of the tent. Zinaida Kolmogorova was found farther up the slope, also apparently moving toward the campsite. Rustam Slobodin lay between them. Their position suggested that after reaching the forest, they had attempted to climb back toward the tent but collapsed in the darkness and cold. 5 hikers had now been found, and their deaths could largely be explained by hypothermia. But 4 members of the group were still missing. When the snow began to melt more than 2 months later, searchers discovered them deep inside a ravine, buried beneath several feet of snow. What the autopsies revealed would transform a tragic winter accident into one of the most disturbing mysteries of the 20th century. When investigators finally uncovered the remaining 4 hikers in early May, hidden beneath nearly 13 feet of compacted snow inside a narrow ravine, the mystery took a far darker turn. Unlike the first 5 victims, who had largely died from exposure to the brutal winter conditions, these 4 displayed injuries that seemed almost impossible to explain. Lyudmila Dubanina had suffered multiple broken ribs with tremendous force. Nikolai Thibault-Brinol had a devastating skull fracture. Semyon Zolotaryov's chest had been crushed. Alexander Kolevatov also showed significant injuries while remaining strangely free of the cuts and bruises normally associated with such trauma. The forensic examiner later remarked that the force required to create some of these injuries was comparable to that of a high-speed automobile collision. Yet there were no signs of an attacker, no defensive wounds suggesting a violent struggle, and no obvious evidence that another person had been present. Even stranger, the soft tissue damage that usually accompanies such crushing injuries was largely absent, leading some investigators to believe the force had been distributed across the body rather than delivered by a blunt weapon. Then came one of the most controversial discoveries in the entire case. Lyudmila Dubanina was missing her tongue, parts of her lips, sections of facial tissue, and portions of one eye. Another victim was also missing an eye. Over the decades, countless books, documentaries, and conspiracy theories claimed these injuries proved that something supernatural or horrifying had happened on the mountain. However, modern forensic experts point out that these bodies remained under snow and flowing water for months before being recovered. Scavenging animals, natural decomposition, and water erosion can remove soft tissue from exposed areas of the face long before the rest of the body significantly decomposes. While disturbing to witness, these injuries are now generally considered consistent with post-mortem environmental damage rather than evidence of torture or murder. Even so, the questions continued to multiply. Some items of clothing collected from the victims were found to contain traces of radioactive contamination. Although the levels were relatively low, they immediately fueled rumors involving secret Soviet weapons tests, military experiments, or classified nuclear technology. Years later, researchers suggested more ordinary explanations. At least 2 members of the expedition had previously worked around facilities where radioactive materials were present, making secondary contamination entirely possible. Yet because Soviet authorities released only limited information during the Cold War, suspicion continued to grow. Witnesses living many miles away also reported seeing mysterious glowing orange spheres moving across the night sky around the same time the hikers disappeared. These reports inspired theories involving experimental missiles, secret aircraft, and even extraterrestrial visitors. However, investigators were never able to directly connect those sightings to the deaths on the mountain, and many historians believe the lights may have been unrelated military rocket launches observed from great distances. As public curiosity intensified, speculation exploded. Some believed the hikers had been attacked by escaped prisoners, despite no evidence placing criminals anywhere near the site. Others suggested local Mansi hunters had murdered the group, a theory that quickly collapsed because the Mansi cooperated with investigators, had no known motive, and left no tracks or evidence behind. Stories about the mythical Yeti also became wildly popular after newspapers sensationalized one of the hikers' humorous journal entries mentioning the creature as a joke. Paranormal investigators proposed everything from ghosts and curses to interdimensional forces. None of these theories survived serious examination because none matched the physical evidence recovered at the scene. Decades later, scientists returned to the case with modern technology. One of the strongest explanations focuses on a rare type of slab avalanche. Unlike the massive avalanches seen in movies, a slab avalanche can involve a relatively small section of hardened snow breaking loose above a campsite. If the hikers heard cracking snow or felt pressure building above their tent during the night, they may have believed a larger avalanche was imminent. Cutting through the side of the tent would have been the fastest way to escape. Once outside, they likely moved downhill toward the shelter of the forest, expecting to return after the danger had passed. Unfortunately, in complete darkness, with temperatures approaching -40 degrees and hurricane-force winds reducing visibility, returning to the tent became nearly impossible. As hypothermia developed, judgment rapidly deteriorated. Some attempted to start a fire. Others climbed the tree hoping to locate the campsite. 3 tried to make their way back uphill but collapsed before reaching it. The remaining 4 sought better shelter inside the ravine, where the weight of accumulated snow may have collapsed onto them, producing the severe internal injuries documented during the autopsies. In 2021, researchers used computer simulations originally developed to study avalanche mechanics and concluded that a delayed slab avalanche combined with the terrain and snow conditions could realistically explain many of the unusual injuries and the hikers' behavior. Even with this new evidence, not everyone agrees. Some investigators argue that unanswered questions remain, while others believe the available evidence now fits a tragic sequence of natural events rather than a mysterious attack. More than 60 years after those 9 young hikers vanished into the frozen darkness, the Dyatlov Pass incident continues to fascinate millions around the world because it reminds us that nature itself can sometimes appear more terrifying than any monster ever imagined. The mountain never revealed exactly what happened during those final hours, but the evidence suggests that a chain of deadly decisions, extreme weather, overwhelming cold, and immense natural forces may have been enough to destroy even one of the Soviet Union's most experienced hiking teams. Sometimes the greatest mysteries are not created by the supernatural. Sometimes they are born from the unforgiving power of the wilderness, where one unexpected moment can change history forever.